quizás esa idea de arte para todos, justamente es eso, una idea, ¿no? Es una idea. Entonces, si nos enfrentamos a la obra de la conversación con la liebre muerta, ¿no? Nos estaría quizás ubicando, creo yo, en un plano más real, ¿no? No será como también la liebre, la liebre muerta, yo sé que la liebre tiene en la obra de Beuys muchas simbologías, creo que también asociada a la mujer, a la posibilidad de reproducción, etcétera, ¿no? Pero quizás en cuanto a la referencia a la obra de arte, ¿no sería también el caso del espectador que, digamos, el caso también de que la obra a veces resulta como, o el espectador, ¿no? Mejor dicho, es como alguien muerto que no puede recibir. Y en ese caso me parece que ese gesto que tiene Beuys, muy amoroso diría, ¿no? Inclusive ayer Mark decía que hay una escena de esa acción donde él la sube a su regazo casi como si fuera una Madonna con el niño, ¿no? Hay un gesto amoroso y esa forma muy pausada, muy lenta, en que él toma la patita del conejo y la hace tocar la obra de arte. ¿No será también una forma de hacernos ver de que justamente, más allá de reflexionar, de la interpretación más o menos racional que uno puede hacer, lo que se ha perdido es algo mucho más fundamental, que es la capacidad de ver directamente, después interpretar, pero si no vemos, no interpretamos, porque me parece que ahí la liebre estaría más sacada de toda interpretación, estaría apelando más a un acto de visión, de la dificultad de ver, como si estuviéramos, digamos, los seres humanos hoy en una especie de anestesia generalizada, donde no vemos lo que pasa alrededor. Y en ese sentido sería la figura de la liebre muerta, ¿no? Que no puede ver. No sé, es una interpretación, me parece que a considerar.
I don't think I would go as far as you in the interpretation. For me, a couple things are happening in that performance, that action. First of all, for me, it's just a profoundly emotional thing. And it's a little bit like seeing a great Pietà by Giovanni Bellini, where you just want to cry. You just want to cry. Because it is emotional. It is so emotional that he's holding this dead hare. And the gold leaf on his head, of course, is like a halo. Just to add complexity to this story, a couple of years before that performance, he did another performance in which he took a dead hare and cut out its heart and hung the hare on some sticks. So think of that, and now he comes along. Now, needless to say, he didn't kill either of these animals. The first hare was dead already. But for me, when you know that, which of course is inside information, but even without knowing it, just to watch him cradling that hare is, for me, like a pietà or a lamentation. The other part of it, though, which for me is so fascinating, is, first of all, he uses animals in his work extensively. He even claimed that he wanted to start a political party for animals, as if to defend their interests. He very clearly thought that animals had all kinds of insights that humans would never have. forms of seeing. So that's in the background. Now, the title of the work is How to Explain Pictures to a Dead Hare. And during the performance, you see his lips moving. He's sort of whispering to the dead hare. For me, that has various connotations. First of all, the hare has its form of insight, and perhaps Beuys is suggesting that the highest form of insight for human beings is art. But at any rate, it's the form of insight Beuys has. And so we have the subject of art brought into the conversation of his work and in this work. And we know that he feels that art has this enormous potential. But finally, naturally, the dead hare isn't responding. So it's sort of another of these doubles or these pairings where the twain will never meet. That he's doomed if he keeps trying to do this. And it's a very sad moment, very sad. I hope I haven't made you all sad. I'm communicating my own sadness. Oh.
Esta dificultad de unir también se da en esta obra de las cajas vacías, donde, que está acá, está arriba, ¿no? La parte de arriba de la exposición. Y donde también uno ve un triángulo como una figura perfecta, la figura perfecta del triángulo, que él va a usar también en la acción con el coyote, que es el instrumento musical con el cual él llama la atención al coyote, ¿no? Es decir, por un lado está esta perfección encarnada en el triángulo y por otro lado están esas dos cajas vacías que también me parece que nos hacen sentir la posibilidad de la síntesis, de la unión, ¿no? De esto justamente que él quería, unión de lo femenino con lo masculino, ¿no? de los opuestos. En cuanto al hecho de que hay mucha emoción, como muy bien dice Mark, hay mucha emoción, mucha emotividad en la obra de él. También está esta idea de la falta, la idea de la muerte, ¿no? Y la pregunta sería, ¿en qué medida también no hay una herencia en cuanto a cierta temática, ¿no? Ligada a esta cuestión imposible que puede ser el amor o puede ser que se manifiesta a partir de esa imposibilidad de una síntesis o que se manifiesta a través de la muerte? No tiene que ver con ciertas ideas que han quedado en Beuys del romanticismo alemán, la nostalgia, la melancolía.
Well, the triangle that you mentioned is his solution for binding a wound, or it's the form of a triangle is his sort of diagram for how to join things together. And parenthetically, the triangle was very important to Rudolf Steiner in Theosophy, which Beuys was interested in. The triangle was also used fairly often by Vasily Kandinsky, the great abstract artist. The triangle is a rich formal element, and Beuys used it a lot. In terms of the German Romanticism, Elena and I were talking about this yesterday, and I joked that German Romanticism influenced 100 years of art, I think. What's a greater sort of pictorial conceit or motif than melancholy and unrealized emotions and things like that? And Beuys is certainly full of it. Beuys is certainly full of it, especially because, I mean, one wonders, would he have celebrated when the Berlin Wall came down? I mean, that happened with such suddenness, and he, of course, was dead at that point. So I think melancholy is absolutely an element of his work, as it is with half of the abstract painters. And you know, he is a German. With Rothko, German Romanticism is a continent removed. But for Beuys, it's very close. So I think, yes, that's absolutely appropriate.
Yo considero que estuve leyendo atentamente el ensayo del catálogo libro que produjo Proa justamente en relación a esta muestra, y me parece que uno de los tantos tiene muchos méritos. Uno de los tantos méritos de ese ensayo de Mark Rosenthal está en hacernos ver que el personaje autogenerado por Beuys debe ser examinado en el contexto de principios a mediados de los años 60. Uno de los artistas que me menciona es Duchamp. ¿Acaso el silencio de Duchamp, pienso en esos 20 años que supuestamente Duchamp estaba en silencio, que no hacía obra, que el silencio de Duchamp, que Beuys considera que fue sobreestimado, fue una motivación o una base o un estímulo para el desarrollo de las propuestas de Beuys?
My feeling is that every ambitious artist is thinking about whose body he or she needs to climb over in order to be successful. And it doesn't mean that there isn't respect for that body. The question is, there's enormous respect for that body because that's the body you have to climb over. Otherwise, you'll never get anywhere if you're ambitious. So Picasso made the Demoiselle d'Avignon 2 years after the big Cézanne exhibition in Paris, where the hit of the Cézanne exhibition was, of course, the late bathers. And he comes along and makes his own bathers based on prostitutes in a whorehouse. So that's how Picasso leapt over the body of Cézanne. Duchamp made a work called 50, not centimeters, centiliters? I don't know what that's called. 50 Duchamp made a work called 50 cubic centimeters of Paris air. And it's this beautifully shaped little bottle.
Sí.
And who would know if there's even air in there? You know, no one knows. It's a concept. Beuys loved to make works that were filled to over brimming. So one day he swept trash and filled a glass vitrine with the trash of Berlin. Whether intentionally or not, it's a great joke about the 50 centimeter, not centimeters, I can't get that straight, of Paris air. For Beuys, stepping over the body of Duchamp was very important. And he was going to be compared to Duchamp if he didn't step over his body. So he made this work called The Silence of Duchamp is Overrated, which is a very funny, sarcastic, ironic title. And Beuys, by the way, is rarely sarcastic or ironic. Very interesting. Very interesting. He's rarely that way. But he was that way with Duchamp. And it's a little bit like a son who's looking to fight with his father. You're not so smart. I could tell you something. So the title obviously has that kind of pointed reference. But Beuys wanted to step over the body of Duchamp and step over this pose of Duchamp whereby he seemed to have departed the ball field of art to simply play chess. And Beuys's entire life and career was involved in being engaged with society and having an art that was engaged with society, so that to be silent and, as Duchamp implied, mysterious would be qualities that Beuys would be derisive of, sarcastic about. So I think one must compare Beuys to Duchamp in lots of ways. But finally, Beuys is going to the next steps.
Me parece interesante, ¿no? El ejemplo de la obra de Duchamp, de la cápsula de aire de París vacía contra las botellas de agua contaminada del Rin, ¿no? Todas esas acciones que hizo con Nicolás García Uriburu, y que hace poco Nicolás hizo también algo acá en relación a las aguas contaminadas del riachuelo. Lo vacío, porque no sabemos si esa ampolleta de Duchamp tiene o no aire. Y lo otro es la contundencia del agua contaminada que efectivamente está ahí y que podemos oler todavía ahora. Bueno, como nos estamos aproximando al final, la pregunta final y difícil, un poco difícil, es ¿en qué medida consideras, Mark, que Beuys es un artista que, más allá de la importancia histórica que tiene para la historia del arte, resulta actual o que se mantiene vigente hoy de el pensamiento o de la propuesta de Duchamp? Perdón, de Beuys. De Beuys.
Well, here's what is current. And I'm not saying Beuys is the first artist involved with this, but he certainly is a great example of it. My own feeling about the contemporary art scene, and of course there's so many contemporary art scenes, and there's so many artists, and there's so many scenes in each country, and so on and so forth. But my own feeling about contemporary art is that I myself find much that feels contemporary of the time, and parenthetically that I enjoy, is highly theatrical. And by that I mean, if an artist is making a painting, it's the size of a garage. Or the person who trains as a painter starts making operas. Or the person who trains as a sculptor starts making music. And it's been a long time this way, that the person called an artist with a small a has become the artist with the capital A, who can do anything. Remember, Joseph Beuys also helped start the Green Party. Beuys's example, I suppose, was of liberation, that he could do he went to art school. It wasn't that he didn't go to art school. It wasn't that he didn't know how to draw. But he wanted to be able to do anything, including political acts. And as I said before, those performances, just imagine being there, were so theatrical and emotional and concocted, contrived. I mean, this wasn't just somebody playing around. He was manipulating the emotions, clearly. So, to me, the element of theater and the idea of an artist not being in an ivory tower are qualities that Beuys certainly exemplified and are still very much with us. And just to add to this, in terms of the question, is Beuys still relevant to us today? Beuys died in 1986. That's 30 years ago. 30 years ago is nothing in art history, just nothing. So even the pretension, which I know, the pretense that I know Elena wasn't exhibiting, that, you know, an artist's career could be unimportant after 30 years. That isn't how art history works. Just isn't.
Okay. I would prefer to speak in English. I'm sorry. I would like to ask you the question about the political activity of Joseph Beuys, because as quite know, his political position opposed in a way maybe to some left or communist party in Germany, and also his conception of the third way, which was also very interesting. If you could just speak a little bit about that.
Well, Beuys's politics were hard to understand. I spent a lot of time reading his political statements. Now, first of all, in terms of the simplistic way we get politics anymore, are you left or are you right, you know, and there's nothing in between, and hatred and all that. Beuys can't be understood that way. Of course he was a Marxist. 80% of Germans were Marxists. But he was a capitalist. It wasn't like he went running to the Soviet Union to spend the rest of his life. And I speak about my own, I guess, inability. I mean, he lectured endlessly about politics and about capitalism and how goods get moved from place to place and how people are taken advantage of and so forth. But as best I could understand his politics, separate from the Green Party, which is very specific, obviously, I think of his politics in a way as what came to be known at a certain point in history as the third way. And this was an idea that maybe capitalism isn't perfect, and maybe communism isn't perfect. Maybe what's needed is, there's the triangle, by the way, taking something of each and making a system out of it. And it used to be said that that was Sweden, that Sweden's political system represented the third way. For me, that's the best synthesis of his ideas, or summary of his ideas. As I say, the Green Party is very specific for what it stands for, is very concrete. Yesterday I was talking about this sort of philosopher in America called Buckminster Fuller, who used to give 6-hour lectures about sort of how politics could all come together to produce a great life. And he would end his lecture by saying, if you want to drive a Cadillac, there'd be a Cadillac for you. If you wanted to be a philosopher, you wouldn't need to work. If you liked to work, there'd be a job for you. That this kind of society was possible, he said, given the wealth of resources and the potential of industry. And I think Beuys had a lot in common with that kind of thinking.
Sí, la pregunta tiene que ver con la performance con la liebre muerta. Se hizo mención de que era una especie de metáfora de que nosotros estamos incapaces o estamos muertos para percibir los hechos. Bueno, yo entiendo la performance como un ejercicio de imaginación con toda la connotación emotiva del chamanismo y demás. Pero quería preguntar acerca de esto en el sentido de la comunicación, porque hace 2 años estuvo aquí Gianni Vattimo y dijo que los hechos no existen, solo hay discursos sobre los hechos. Y de alguna forma parece que todo se mueve en un nivel discursivo, teórico, que también pierde conexión con la realidad, que es lo que decía hace 30 años Jameson, que nos estamos, es decir, en el arte predomina el lenguaje esquizofrénico. Se podría hacer una relación, digamos, no directamente con la obra de Beuys, pero sí con la situación general del arte.
¿Es para mí?
Our art is schizophrenic.
Sí, no es fácil de contestar, porque yo creo que también Nietzsche decía, no hay hechos, solo interpretaciones, ¿no? No hay hechos, solo interpretaciones, con lo cual, si vamos a pensar en esto, la cadena de interpretaciones es infinita, ¿no? Es infinita. Yo creo que es una obra que tiene muchísimas lecturas. Me parece que, bueno, podríamos interpretar que hay como, así como se dice que el barroco es la locura del ver, en cuanto que el barroco nos permite, no tenemos un punto de vista, sino que en el barroco podemos ver desde distintos puntos de vista. En relación a lo que decías, me parece que podría haber una locura de la interpretación, ¿no? Que podemos desde distintos puntos de vista. Entonces ahí, en vez de comunicar, finalmente caeríamos en todo lo contrario, ¿no? En esta locura de la interpretación. Eso es cierto. Por eso también me pareció muy importante lo que dijo Mark en cuanto a, así como Steiner habla también de volver directamente a la percepción de la obra, ¿no? Presencias reales, ¿no? George Steiner, no Rudolf, George Steiner, volver a esta cosa más primaria, ¿no? Emotiva, volver a la emoción, que quizás eso nos conecta, nos une más a los seres humanos, desde ese punto de vista, ¿no? Pero en fin, me parece muy interesante. Bueno, tenemos como para una pregunta más, si quieren.
Bueno, esto es directamente para Mark Rosenthal.
Ah, bueno.
Es la connotación que tiene para Beuys haber formado parte del ejército alemán. Hay que recordar un caso paralelo, que es el de Günter Grass, que recibió el premio Nobel y formó parte de la juventud hitleriana también. Y conviene recordar también, cuando le preguntaron en el otro polo a José Saramago qué opinaba de este antecedente de Günter Grass, dijo, sí, pero él escribió El tambor de hojalata y otras obras que lo redimen, digamos. Creo que con Beuys se podría hacer tal vez la misma reflexión, ¿no?
Well, I don't you know, is it our obligation? Are we God in heaven to excuse him? I don't know how to deal with that, really. Do I think it's worth hating him? No. There was a man in America the other day who shouted Heil Hitler and killed 3 people who weren't even Jewish. He made a mistake, this horrible person. I personally think Beuys spent his life trying to deal with that. And one thing that's absolutely not known about Beuys, and maybe it's in the records, is that maybe he killed people with some of those flights. That has never come out. We don't know. But he didn't hide his head in the sand over the history of Germany, as many other Germans did. So, and he spoke to Germany. He spoke to Germany about itself. So, in the words of American criminal justice, he went straight. Thank you all.